Hey, this is Dave Nillette. I'm so glad that you're interested in our Seeing Jesus More Clearly Bible studies. There is always something good going on here. If you want to learn more about the ministry, you can do so. Go into our website, bygraceinternational.com, and maybe you want to support what we're doing financially. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can go there as well, bygraceinternational.com/give. Thanks.
When does the Christmas season begin? That's a question that a lot of us like to ask. And for those of you who might be friends with me on Facebook, you'll see me engage in some good-natured ribbing and teasing with some friends from time to time regarding it. And some people are of the camp that we can start the Christmas season whenever we want. September, August, shoot, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not too early. Put up the tree, the lights, the Christmas carols, start the movies. It's a Wonderful Life, get ready to hear Jimmy Stewart, I Want to Live Again, Clarence. Get that, ringing out and ready to go. And other people like me are more of the opinion that the celebration begins after Thanksgiving. Every holiday has a place and every holiday in its place. And I tend to fall in the latter line. So, we do some teasing, have some fun along those lines. But in reality, outside of all these other things, the decorations, the lights, the Christmas movies, and so on and so forth, there's a sacred calendar, a sacred tradition that the church has held to for quite some time now. And this is the tradition, the season known as Advent. And for those of you like me who were perhaps raised in the church, but ignorant of, the liturgical calendar, ignorant of, these different seasons, these times, these meanings, you might be wondering to yourself, well, what on earth is Advent? And that's a wonderful question. For the way that we grew up, Advent was simply just some religious tradition. It was something we didn't put any stock in. There was no weight, there was no meaning to the Advent season. Sometimes we might do Christmas themed messages as the Christmas season approached, but a lot of times it would be we'd incorporate a few Christmas carols here and there, and the pastor, my dad, would go about his sermon as per usual. And when the time, everything was all said and done, we'll have our Christmas sermon on Christmas, or maybe the week of Christmas, and then, the Christmas Eve service, light the candles, everybody go home, see your families, wonderful time, see you next year. But the Advent season is about far more than that. It's so much deeper than this, and it's really one of those things that as I've slowly begun to explore, and I don't even think I'm fully there yet, but as I've begun to just slowly explore this, I see that Advent is about more than just the Christmas Day celebration itself, right? Advent is about far more than that. Advent is the word Advent means arrival, right? The arrival. We use this language commonly when we refer to, say, the advent of the information age, the advent of the printing press, these different things. It's about the arrival of something noticeable, something that makes a mark on society, on the world around us. And during this season, we're celebrating the advent of Jesus, the arrival of Jesus. And when this tradition began, it was thought to be important by those who led the church to lead into Jesus's arrival, right? We celebrate Easter, Good Friday, the death, the burial, the resurrection of Jesus. But they thought coming into the celebration of the birth of Jesus, which, yes, we know didn't occur December 25th. Yes, we know it wasn't this time of year. This was a holiday that was largely adapted, taken as far as the winter solstice is concerned and things like that. All of that's true. But the point behind it is not so much the actual timing of the celebration, but rather the season itself, the celebration, right? And so what they felt appropriate was for us as Christians, as the church, as people, to prepare our hearts to celebrate the arrival of Jesus on the earth, to prepare our heart to celebrate, to anticipate the coming of the King, the coming of the Messiah. So that's really what this is. It's a time, it's a season of preparation where we commit that we're going to get our hearts ready for the coming of Jesus. And it's a season marked by many things. There's, of course, the anticipation and the joy of the hope that Christ is coming, the anticipation and the joy that Messiah will soon be here. But it's also marked by lament. It's also marked by sadness, that we see things that are wrong in the world, that we see creation groaning. We see creation groaning, desiring to see Christ arrive and set all things right, that the earth itself is waiting to this day even for the Apocatastasis of all things, for the setting right of all things. And so let's look here at the gospel reading for this week. This comes from the Revised Common Lectionary. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a prayer, a book of prayers. It's a book of scriptural readings that go through a 3-year cyclical period that a number of churches will sort of structure their sermons around. Their everything goes through this reading, and there's the portions where it goes through the Gospels, and then there's the other portions where it goes through the arrival of Jesus, and then the season of Lent, things like that. So this is the Gospel reading for the week, and there's a few more. I'll link to it in the video below, but I just want to read this verse and this passage here in the book of Matthew, and it just kind of jumped out at me a different way as I was reading it and preparing. So Matthew 24, starting in verse 36, "But about that day and hour no one knows, neither the angels of heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. For as the days of Noah were, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing until the flood came and swept them all away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 will be in the field, 1 will be taken and 1 will be left. 2 women will be grinding meal together, 1 will be taken and 1 will be left. Keep awake, therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known in part known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an unexpected hour." Now, traditionally, in the evangelical world, traditionally in our modern evangelical culture, this verse has been taken to be a passage about the return of Christ. And yes, Jesus seems to be speaking here about his return. But I see something different here in reading this in the first week of Advent. And it's simply this. It's that there's a world in turmoil, a world in chaos, and this world is waiting for the Messiah to appear. This is a world that is desperate for the arrival of Messiah, for the arrival of the King. And this is the place that Jesus found his brethren at in the first century. They had been, think of it, they had been under the rule and reign of the Roman Empire. They had been under the rule and reign of the Babylonian Empire. There had been so many different people groups that had ruled and reigned over them that you have to think to yourself, what is going on here? When is the Messiah going to come and set all things right? And this is the cry of many people in the world today. When will Messiah be here? When will the Messiah come back and set all things right? And while we sit here and we wait, we anticipate the arrival of the Son of God. The Son is coming at an unexpected hour. And this really reminds me of a book. Maybe you're familiar with it. It's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Chronicles of Narnia is, it's one of my favorite series. I very much enjoy C.S. Lewis's writings there and how he sort of approaches the whole thing. But let's set the stage for those of you who might not be familiar with C.S. Lewis's work. we've got a world, and it's created by Aslan. Aslan, if you don't know, is a lion, a literal lion. Yes, it's a Jesus allegory. But the lion is the son of the great emperor over the sea. And in the Magician's Nephew, we see Aslan creates the world of Narnia, all the things in it, and it's wondrous, beautiful, good. But through humans' foolish actions, evil enters the world in the form of Jadis. She was from the world of Charn, and she was, a large, giant type woman, and her whole people were, and she was the one who had essentially condemned her entire world to extinction. And so she's released in this world through the foolish actions of these human children. And we see later on, we're not quite sure how much later it is, but later on, by the time we get to the next book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, she's eventually overtaken Aslan's domain of Narnia. And so she rules over Narnia with an iron fist for 100 years. And she's driven out all sense of hope in Aslan, all sense of hope in Aslan coming to set things right, to the point that the name of Aslan, the mention of Aslan, belief in Aslan's very existence, we're all driven out. These things did not exist. They were not permitted a place. They were not permitted a presence there. Some people sat there and began to question. It's been winter for 100 years. That's the thing. It was 100-year winter, and it's always winter and never Christmas. If Aslan truly exists, and we must have done something to upset him, to offend him, I don't know, but he's either turned his back on us, or he never existed at all. And this is the plight that we find, the Narnians in. This is where they stand, and they found themselves, and he's either dead, or he doesn't care, or he never existed. And this is how I imagine a number of the Jewish people in the first century would have felt. If God really exists, and they believed he did, many of them, I'm sure, we've been ruled over for hundreds of years by outside occupying forces. There have been people who have just taken us and beaten us down, and we've been driven from our land and returned to our land, and driven from our land and returned to our land, and the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and so on, the Medes and the Persians, and the Romans. Now all these people are just over us, and now Rome is ruling us, with an iron fist. We've heard that there's a Messiah coming, but will he ever actually make it? Just think of the despair. So what are we to do then? If Messiah's, surely he would have come by now. So either he's not coming, or he never was coming. So we've really got two choices. We can throw our lots in with the occupiers, take up jobs and positions with the tax collectors, and extort our people for financial gain. Better to benefit ourselves than to let ourselves be exploited, right? And to go down with the rest of the sinking ship. Or we can, so you've got the tax collector out there, where you're a traitor to your people, or we can take the route of, it's time to, lock and load and come for these, these SOBs, right? And you've got the zealot route on the other hand, where the zealots, decided that we needed to come back in force and overthrow the Roman Empire. And they were a political faction, and they resisted in mass against the Romans. And so these are really the two different tracks of being. But what I find most intriguing about the parallels between Narnia waiting for the return of Aslan and the not only the place we find ourselves in these days, but how the first century Jewish people might have felt regarding the arrival of Messiah is the words of Mr. Beaver. Now, Mr. Beaver, if you're not familiar with the Narnia series, the Beaver family is not the first, but one of the first talking animals that we meet in Narnia, and he befriends the Pevensey children and tells them of Aslan. He takes them to his dam where him and Mrs. Beaver live, and they do all their preparations and so on and so forth. And he's the one who tells them of the story of Aslan and how Aslan's prophesied return is soon coming, and he's giving them this whole speech of what they're up against and the prophecy around Aslan. He gets to this passage here, and I just find it so beautiful. He says, "Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death, and when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again." I love that. And it's just the anticipation that Mr. Beaver had around Aslan's arrival in that prophecy mirrors the anticipation that I see in ourselves for the arrival of Christ. Because when Christ arrives, wrongs will be righted. Things that have been wrong will be set right. Sorrows will be no more. Right? There's that verse that talks about that every tear from our eyes will be wiped away. Death will be defeated. Winter meets its death, right? Winter is a symbol of death. It's symbolic, indicative of death. Everything dies in the winter, right? You've got the plants that die, the animals go into hibernation, all these other things. Winter is a season of death prior to a season of rebirth. So winter, death itself meets its death. And when he shakes his mane, we'll have spring again. That's life returning. So death will die and life will return. This is the anticipation laid out by Mr. Beaver for the Pevensey children. This is the anticipation held by the Jewish people awaiting the arrival of the Messiah. And this is the anticipation that you and I cling to as it comes to the arrival of Christ, the advent of the Christ. This is our anticipation that though all may be wrong in the world, wrong will be made right when Aslan comes into sight. This is what we anticipate. This is what we celebrate. And we can trust that as we're waiting for Christ's arrival, as we're waiting for Christ's return, that even though there's all this stuff going on that we see that's that's wrong in the world, people treating each other terribly and all of that, we know that Christ is coming. And we wait with bated breath for the return of Christ, for the arrival of Christ to set all things right. Amen. And that's what we are celebrating this season. So I hope you enjoyed it, and join me next week, and we'll pick up in the second week of Advent. Amen.